Hello, hello, hello. we have it's we have a person joining us when he arrives, but I wanted to introduce to you some new members of our orchestra. We, as you know, usually happens about once a year, I would say, when it's not COVID. We will hold auditions when there are available positions in the orchestra, and they're nationally advertised. And indeed, the two people sitting to my right are from around the country. And I wanted to share with you this process, this wonderfully intricate and very demanding process of the audition. So here are two new members of our Las Vegas Philharmonic. I have Elliot Lee he's a violinist. Welcome, Elliot, to Las Vegas Philharmonic. And Kevin Mills, our new associate principal cellist. Kevin, I'll start with you. This all happened, by the way, these auditions in November. That's right, back in November. And over the course of 2 days, there is a panel of judges, members of the orchestra and myself, that sit out there in the empty hall. And then on stage, across the entire width of the hall, is a black panel. And the entire process is anonymous. In other words, we do not know, we have no idea who's auditioning. This has been, that's fine. Getting to the Smith Center, for those of us who are new to the orchestra, getting to the Smith Center can often be tricky this time of day. So,
kids are tricky.
Oh, it's your kids. Okay. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is another new member of our orchestra, the violinist Alexander Zavinsky. I was just sort of mentioning this process. It's a rather unique process, and so we listen to these candidates. Candidate 1, candidate 2, candidate 3. There's usually at least 2 rounds where we first hear perhaps 20 to 30 auditionees, and we whittle that down to 3 or 4 finalists. And then from the final round, we choose usually a winner. And I'd just like to get from your side of this panel, your impression. Kevin, how about you? You're from California. Where do you live?
I live in LA.
You live in Los Angeles. And this process of auditioning, this is something that one does often, certainly right out of conservatory into your 20s and 30s. And tell us a little bit about how one finds out about an audition like the Las Vegas Philharmonic.
So I finished school about 4 years ago, and then I immediately started auditioning all over the country and a couple in Europe. And right before I got this job, this past summer, I won my very first job with a very small orchestra in Oregon. And then in November, we had this audition. I found out about it through a random website I saw online. But funny enough, Andy Smith, the principal cello, him and I met over a decade ago. My teacher at my undergrad and him had an exchange program with students, and so I met and played for him many years ago. And so when I got this job and I saw him on the panel, I said, "Oh, hey, I know you. How's it going?" So that's how I heard about this audition.
And when you know, this is something that I don't know, because of course we as the panel, we're not even allowed to enter the building at the same time for fear of seeing the candidates and not having a true anonymous audition. So when you enter the building, you are greeted by
the security guard.
And then hopefully you're allowed into the building. And then you're given what? Are you given a practice room? Are you given a certain amount of time to practice and
Yes,
prepare?
we checked in, and we each got our own individual warm-up room. This space is really lucky to have like 10 rooms just lined up, ready to go, which is not always the case. Usually there's like a general warm-up room that 20 people are shredding at the same time, trying to play as loud as they can. So this is a luxury that we got our own practice rooms.
And Elliot, there are these things called orchestral excerpts, which are often trickier passages for one reason or another, whether it's technically challenging or musically challenging. How many excerpts normally are on an audition, and what you prepare? Is this something that is standardized from one audition to the next?
I think it differentiates between the orchestra and the director, but usually the number is around 10 to 15. And then major orchestras, I think, will bump that up to 20. Especially if you're auditioning for a principal position, then they'll have like concertmaster excerpts or chamber music excerpts. So it does vary, but generally you have like your standard 10. Yeah.
And Elliot, where do you come from? Where do you join us from?
I'm coming from Chicago, so not close.
And tell us what this experience was like from your point of view. Every audition is, depending, of course, has a lot to do with the building. We're very fortunate to have a wonderful space in which to audition. But there is also the organizational aspect, because you need to receive the music with ample enough time to prepare it. So we send that to you, yes? How does that work?
Yeah, I think when I looked on the website, I think it directed me to the Las Vegas Phil website, which then had the excerpt list as a PDF. So it was accessible to everyone who wanted to take the audition with plenty of time in advance. So I think that's correct, right? Okay. Yeah.
Alexander, now you've been in the Las Vegas area now for...
This is my third year.
Third year, right? But before that, where were you playing violin?
Well, I grew up in New York City, but I was lucky enough, I had a very nice orchestra job in Denmark, where I worked for 7 years.
You were in an orchestra in Denmark for 7 years, and then you, with your family, moved here to Las Vegas. And well, first of all, that's an incredible journey in and of itself and a story, I'm sure. But for yourself, playing within an orchestra versus, I want to talk about this with all three of you, but taking an audition for an orchestra is unique unto itself because of this anonymity, right? Maybe describe what it's like trying to make music to a black screen rather than an audience.
Right. Well, I don't know. To me, it's I kind of just imagine the jury sitting over there, so I try to do my best. You know, I don't care so much for the screen, to be honest. I know that there are people there, so I play for them. You know.
You hope they're on the other side.
Well, yeah. Yes.
Have any of the three of you ever served on a committee? Have you ever been on the other side?
Yes, I have. At my old job.
Would you describe the difference? Because of course, obviously, the nerves of playing auditions slightly different, but the responsibility of choosing a new member of our family is also, the responsibility is there. Yes.
No, that's huge. It's huge because well, you can't see that. All you can just hear is the music, or you hope there's music. But there's many things to consider when choosing a colleague. So yes, indeed, it's a very big responsibility. And usually, from what I witness, is quite a bit of fighting within the committee, at least in what I've seen.
It can be the case. That's certainly true. Now, once you win this audition, there is what's then called there's a review process that usually lasts. I think officially it's 2 years for this orchestra, perhaps. And then, but as music director, after 1 year, I can choose to award what's called tenure, which means you become an official member of the orchestra, which gives you rights and privileges that are quite different than who we call substitute musicians. And from month to month, I would imagine you've noticed over the years coming, you will see not a cavalcade of different faces on stage, but there are different faces from month to month, and these are often substitute musicians, again, that can come from around the country. Are you also in that world of playing, like for instance in Chicago or in Los Angeles, even here in Las Vegas, are you part of this, what would be called the freelance scene, where you're substituting for different ensembles? Elliot?
Yeah, I'm actually, there are 4 orchestras in Chicago that I'm like on the sub list for that I don't really have the time to commit to. Like they didn't really have auditions, so they just had, you just email them your resume and then maybe a video, and then you get on their sub list. So.
Oh, really? So you can just sort of contact them without having to audition?
Right, because they're more regional-based orchestras. They're not like, I guess, as official as Las Vegas. So yeah.
What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, so when I finished school, moved back to LA, I was fortunate to start working freelance in recording sessions and random pickup orchestras and groups like that. Currently, I'm playing here, and like I said, in an orchestra in Oregon, and I also play in an orchestra in Bakersfield, California. And so my life is very travel heavy at the moment, which is great. I mean, I'm happy for the work. But it's very kind of all over the place.
Maybe talking to both of the violinists here, what we do in both violin sections, it's quite a few people. It can often be 10 or 12 folks, maybe more sometimes. And what we do is what we call rotate the musicians, so that for a variety of reasons, mostly to do with so folks don't get bored sitting next to the same person for year in, year out, but also because people have certain strengths that suit themselves to be seated in the middle versus the back, or the inside meaning inside the section, or the outside of the section where you can see them. Can you this is actually really fascinating. I think a lot of people who don't, even within the orchestra, don't understand the intricacies and the effectiveness of sitting in different parts of a section. Alexander, maybe you can tell us a little bit about sitting in the back of the section versus sitting in the front, and how that can differ in terms of how you play.
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, in the perfect world, it really shouldn't matter where you sit, but it does. It's more difficult to sit on the back just purely because of the distance, and just to see what you are doing or what the concertmaster is doing. Usually they have risers, we do not, so that can be sometimes problematic. But I think you bring up a good point about the rotation. I think it's, after a while, I know if you've been on a job for 20 years and you sit in the back, kind of get comfortable and kind of just doodle around. But then if you have, you have to sit here, you're kind of under the conductor's ear, so you have to, you have to play. So I think it's very important to rotate the people.
How about you, Elliot? How about this? The difference between playing outside, on the outside where the audience can see you, versus playing on the inside. There are actually different responsibilities. Like the main thing is turning pages. So talk a little bit about that.
Right. So I'm actually playing inside on this concert cycle, and yeah, I think my main job is to turn the pages for the outside person on time and make sure I don't mess it up. But also, generally the outside person, it's not always the case, but most of the time the outside person will play a higher octave when there's divided parts. So when there are divisi, the outside person will generally play an octave higher. It is the inside player's job to support their sound with the lower octave. So generally we play louder and the outside person will just float on top. And then that creates a cohesive sound. So it's all about finding a different balance depending on your role and what notes you are playing.
So in other words, and you'll see this tonight in the piece we're playing by Anna Klein, the British-American composer. She wrote a piece inspired by the music of Beethoven, and it's called Stride. It's in your program. But what Elliot's referring to, which is called divisi, which is a fancy Italian word for division, which means the section has two different parts. The outside players will play the high part, and the inside players, the inside row, will play the lower part. And I've often will stop, I stopped today, and I asked, and to reinforce the idea that the lower part needs to sound louder than the upper part, because otherwise the upper part doesn't sound supported to you. You would know the difference, believe me, even though we may be talking technical terms. And you'll be able to see it actually when they're playing and hear it. You'll hear both the upper part and lower part, and you'll see the inside players. You'll see Elliot tonight playing a little bit with a little more. You are also playing on the inside.
Yes.
Both of you are playing on the inside, and you'll see them playing the lower notes and playing with a little more gusto than the higher players whose job is literally just float over that lower sound. Kevin, you have a slightly, you auditioned for what's called a principal chair. So your title is Assistant Principal Cello of the Las Vegas Philharmonic. So tell us, your responsibilities are maybe slightly different than what's called the section player, someone maybe sitting in the back.
So I basically support the principal cello in any way I can. Like tonight and last month's concert, I got promoted very quickly because he's not here today. So I am sitting principal today. And that is one of the main parts of the assistant principal, is to act as principal when that person is not able to be at the concerts. So that means taking on whatever solos are in the pieces, or telling the section, how to play a certain part, or what bowing, or what fingering, or what kind of sound. So that kind of all rests on my shoulders tonight. But I think it's fun. So
you do that role exceedingly well. And luckily, we, in the best of all possible worlds, like this week, you were informed in advance. But however, like an assistant conductor, which I was for so many years, the San Francisco Symphony, should Andy fall ill the night before, had some oysters that didn't settle well, and can't come to the concert to play, your role would be, theoretically, to already know if there are solos that Andy's playing. You would have to step in with no notice and jump in, right?
Yeah, my first concert here was in January, and each concert since, there's been a cello solo, and Andy has done wonderfully. But just to make sure, I made sure that I knew the notes, just in case that circumstance happens, because if he trips and, God forbid, breaks his pinky, it's on me. So that's another big part of being an assistant principal.
I always like to save some room. We all have to we're half-dressed. I need to put my tails on, and we have to get ready to play. But I'd love to save room for some questions for our new members of the orchestra from you.
You mentioned turning the pages, and I've seen in recent concerts where there's electronic devices. Now, where are we with that, or how good is it, or bad, or what's the situation with that?
Okay, this is a wonderful question, because this gentleman is asking about the use of iPads. Generally, everyone that is now have switched electronically. You'll see actually Shake and Kevork, our principal second and assistant principal second, they each have their own stand, and they're using iPads, that basically PDFs of the music, and they have a little a foot pedal, and they click it, and it'll turn the page while they're playing. And there are many. Maybe Deanne. I think Deanne is used. Our concert master has switched to using an iPad, and various other members of the orchestra are now using this system. And of course, instead of carrying a folder of music and various folders of music from many different ensembles that you might be playing in. She just now, these people now just have that iPad with, they can have literally millions of pages of music that they so chose on the device. And of course, the Apple, the Pencil, you can mark your parts just like normal. And what makes it very convenient, of course, is that Deanne, she can do bowings, which she can decide what the section will do, whether it's up bow or down bow. She can mark it in onto her PDF and then email it to our orchestra librarian without touching a pencil or an eraser. So it can be very convenient. I, on the other hand, and I cannot, please let me know if you've seen conductors make the switch, I just don't have the guts. I am completely afraid of the possibility of the iPad turning off, or, well, first of all, me tapping the foot pedal instead of standing up there would be rather hilarious, because it add to my, you know how clumsy I am. If
you have a lot more pages to turn to.
That's true. So I haven't done. I don't think any conductor has switched to an iPad. It just we're always like a half page ahead anyway, and we usually have 2 pages of music that we're sort of looking at directly and then looking forward for things to come. So it's not as possible or likely that you'll see a conductor use an iPad. Do you guys feel totally at ease with it? Elliot, I see you shaking your head. Kevin?
No, I like the tangible quality of paper, and it just feels more real, like the music. You know, the composers wrote on paper. I like to play with paper. But, I mean, I'm not against people who use iPads. I mean, it's, 2022, so I get it. But not for me.
Have you tried?
I've tried it. It's okay, but I prefer the music so far. But it's very convenient. You just can pull any part up, and this is the fingering I use, instead of digging out, your closet of, like you said, a gazillion music there. So.
Yes. So she makes the comment about first chair versus second chair versus third chair and the level of the musician. It's actually no. Because we rotate, we expect the person in the back to be as strong as the person in the front. And what Alexander said is very true. Because it is actually, my heart goes out to people that sit in the very back, because it's hard. I try my best to always speak loudly so they can hear, and slowly, because it is challenging, I have to say. And then to see me conduct, and then try to get from the corner of your eye to see what Deanne is, if you're sitting in the first violin, to make sure you're doing exactly, or close to, as much as possible, exactly what she's doing. It's very difficult. It's a challenge. So now that's in the string section. Now you have in the woodwinds and the brass, you have first oboe, second oboe. That's because they're 2 separate parts. Again, it has nothing to do with quality. The first oboe normally will play higher notes, second oboe will play slightly lower notes, but they're both equally important. The same thing in the horn section. Yes, the first horn player will have a solo, but for instance, when you come to see Beethoven's 9th Symphony in May, the big horn solo, the most famous horn solo, one of the most famous horn solos ever written, is in the slow movement of the 9th Symphony, and it's for the 4th horn. It's for the 4th horn player. So again, it's not about level, it's about playing different parts. Yes? So the question was, how many people typically audition for the opening, and how many people are on the panel? It varies. from instrument to instrument. The rarer instruments, for instance, if we were to have an audition for oboe, there aren't that many people who play the oboe. And so we probably, if we were to have an audition for it, we probably wouldn't have that many people apply and that many people audition. So this is just a guess. Instead of, there are a lot of violinists out there because orchestras need a lot of violins. We only need 2 oboes, but we need 25, 30 violin players. So when we have an audition for the violin section, we could have up to 30 people come on one day, and because we have we have a resume round. In other words, we invite people from their resume. We will potentially have 60 to 70 resumes, and we'll invite. We decide how many hours that we can be here to listen to the audition, and that we give each applicant usually around 8 to 10 minutes to audition. And so you do the math. So that's about 6 auditionees per hour. If we have 24 people auditioning, it's a long day. And the panel will be usually, if it's a string audition, there will be, of course, the concertmaster, usually another violinist, and then perhaps another 1 or 2, maybe the principal violist and a cellist, and then a member of the other sections. 1 member of the woodwind family, 1 member of the brass, and maybe percussion. So there's usually about 6 people, depending on who are sitting on the committee.
But
Yes. Yes, you. I'll repeat the question. I'll have these gentlemen answer. The question is, how much do you rely on reading the score during a performance? And we should specify playing in an orchestra versus memorizing the piece. Alexander?
Throughout the rehearsals, because we end up playing things, quite a few times, you do get to automatically memorize sections of it, so you can just focus on the conductor and what he's doing, so you're not glued to the notes all the time. So that it can go both ways. Of course, we have to look at the music. You can't memorize like 30 pages of a symphony and then play another symphony with another 30 pages. But yeah.
Kevin?
I would say, for the most part, we rely on the physical music during concerts because there are just so many notes. But I agree with Alex. After a couple days of rehearsals, certain phrases just become ingrained in the mind and the fingers. So I find myself playing certain things from memory and then subconsciously paying attention to something else happening in the orchestra. So that does happen quite a lot. But I would say we definitely rely on like the visualization of the music in front of us.
Anything to add to that?
I mean, yeah, I think, like you both said, we have to pay attention to other things. So there are crucial moments when Donato is either slowing down or speeding up that we have to actually pay attention to the baton and to Deanne. So in that instance, we generally want to memorize or have a bit of it memorized so we can pay attention more to the front.
And just to add to that, when these gentlemen or anyone else, any other musicians playing a solo recital, again, this is something somewhat due to tradition, sometimes not. They will often play something by memory, but then you'll notice if they're playing with the pianist will be normally, not always, but usually using music so that the pianist's role is to support these soloists in a solo recital and who might be playing by memory to make sure everything is going well. So memorization is, I think, like these gentlemen said, happens. We do 10 hours of rehearsal for one concert, and so over those 10 hours, 4 2.5-hour rehearsals, over the course of those 10 hours, they get comfortable with, and they may have, especially with Beethoven symphonies. We're playing a symphony tonight, Beethoven's 7th Symphony. I think all of us can say safely I've conducted it many times, and they've played it many times, and over the course of one's career, you start really not looking at the music and enjoying what the oboe is doing if you're playing cello, or it's a lovely part of our growth as musicians.
I had another idea regarding our audition. We all auditioned on the same day, and I'm sure both of you can agree. We practiced these excerpts for so many hours, so many days, and after a certain point, they all become fairly memorized, I would say, at least for me. I mean, when I did the audition here, I would say every single one of them was up in here. But it's too scary to go into the audition behind this huge screen trying to do everything memorized. So for me, I still have the physical music, even though I might not look at it. But there's
It's more for comfort. Like,
more for comfort, yeah, yeah. Also, the concerto I play, it's probably, let's say, I've been playing this for a decade, give or take a couple years, and so it's fully up here, but I still have the music in front of me just in case, you know. So I just thought that was an interesting idea I had.
We have to run off and get ready. So enjoy the concert. Thank you so much for being here.